sold my house. While I was in ICU, H reversal woke the judge. That's not a headline. That's my life. When I opened my eyes after 3 weeks in the ICU, I thought the worst was over. But then a nurse handed me my phone and one notification changed everything. Property ownership transfer completed. My house gone. Sold while I was hooked to ventilators fighting for breath. And the man behind it wasn't a stranger. It was my own brother, acting as my power of attorney. He'd sold the property using my digital signature, transferred the money to his account, then vanished. The doctors said I needed rest, but you can't rest when someone steals your life's work. I might have been too weak to walk, but I wasn't too weak to investigate. What he didn't know was that every ACH transfer leaves a trail. And that trail didn't just lead to him. It led straight to a corrupt real estate network that had fooled judges for years, until one reversal woke the right one. This is how a single click exposed an empire of fraud. So stay with me, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me what you'd do if blood stole your home. He sold my house while I was in ICU. Ache reversal woke the judge. That line still feels like fiction, but it isn't. It's my life, signed, sealed, and nearly stolen. I remember the day I woke up. The monitors hummed, the ceiling lights flickered, and the smell of disinfectant stung my throat worse than the oxygen tube. 3 weeks in intensive care, the doctor said. Pneumonia complications. I was lucky to be alive, but luck, I would soon learn, is relative. When you come back from the edge of death, you expect peace. You expect family. What you don't expect is a property transfer alert blinking on your phone. Property ownership transfer. Completed. I read it 3 times, thinking the morphine was playing tricks on me. My name was gone. The address of my house in Dayton, the one I built with overtime wages and a lifetime of sacrifice, now listed under my brother's name. Probably a clerical error, the nurse said softly, checking my IV, but I knew better. Nothing about my brother David was ever a clerical error. David and I hadn't spoken properly in months. He was supposed to handle my bills while I was in the hospital. Temporary power of attorney, just so the mortgage wouldn't default. I'd signed it electronically before the ambulance ride, trusting him. That trust became the weapon that nearly cost me everything. I tried calling him. No answer. Tried again. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Why does the county record say the house is under your name?" No reply. By the next morning, a real estate listing showed up online. My house, my mother's kitchen tiles, my father's oak porch swing, listed sold, cash payment. Escrow closed in 48 hours. You'd think panic would kill me before the infection did, but what I felt was colder. A numbness that starts in the chest and seeps into your bones. Betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers. The hospital discharged me 2 days later. I left in a wheelchair, oxygen tank clattering behind me, and went straight to the county clerk's office. The clerk, a young woman with nervous energy, looked up my address, frowned, and said, "Sir, it shows as an electronic conveyance, signed, witnessed, and notarized." "Impossible," I said. I was unconscious. She turned the monitor slightly toward me. There it was, my digital signature, time-stamped exactly 4 days after I'd been placed on a ventilator. The buyer, a shell company, North Point Assets LLC, and the payment, wired to David's account. That night, back in my temporary care apartment, I printed every document I could. My body was weak, but my mind was running on voltage. Each file, each timestamp, was a nail in the coffin of the lie he'd built. By the weekend, I called a lawyer, Kate Morales, a real estate fraud specialist. Her tone was professional but skeptical. "You're saying your brother sold your house while you were in the ICU?" "Yes, and the transfer went through ACH?" "Exactly. Wire confirmation shows settlement cleared on the 15th. She paused. "Then this isn't just fraud, it's collusion. Someone inside the banking network had to approve it during blackout hours." I didn't understand everything she meant, but I understood one thing. This wasn't just about my brother anymore. Over the next few days, I traced every ACH entry from my checking account. The trail was almost invisible, masked under North Point escrow services. But buried inside the metadata of the PDF confirmation, one name glowed like a beacon: David C. Miller, authorized payee. It wasn't just that he sold it, he'd engineered it. The following week I confronted him. My hands shook as I held the phone, but my voice was steady. "David, I know what you did." Silence. Then a sigh. You don't understand, Mark. The bills were piling up. You were dying, man. What was I supposed to do? Not sell my home. He laughed, small, bitter. You always cared more about that damn house than the people inside it. That was the moment I realized. Some betrayals aren't crimes of opportunity. They're confessions of envy. When the case finally reached civil court, I thought justice would be straightforward, but the system had its own traps. David's attorney argued that the power of attorney document gave him full legal rights to manage, liquidate or transfer assets for medical and financial continuity. The sale, they claimed, was done in good faith. Good faith. Those two words almost buried me again. My lawyer fought hard, but without proof of coercion or digital tampering, the judge couldn't void the sale immediately. Mr. Miller, she said to me gently, without direct evidence of forgery or unauthorized access, I can't issue an emergency injunction. I remember gripping the table, my knuckles white. Your Honor, I was unconscious. How could I authorize anything? Then bring me the system logs, she said. Bring me the proof that this ACH trail isn't what it claims to be. That became my obsession. Every night I went through transaction logs, server pings, and timestamp inconsistencies. My hospital admission record said 3:42 p.m. October 11th. The ACH authorization said 4:09 p.m. October 11th, 17 minutes later. At that time, I was medically sedated with 100% oxygen support. I couldn't sign, couldn't speak, couldn't even blink without machines helping me breathe. And that 17-minute window, that's where I caught him. You see, automated clearinghouses log their reversals differently. A reversal request during settlement hours generates a dual authorization code. It's not visible to users, but it's visible to the Federal Reserve ACH server. And when my lawyer subpoenaed that record, the reversal timestamp didn't match David's claimed login. It matched mine. From an IP inside the hospital network, I hadn't made it, of course, but someone had used my medical tablet. A nurse's station device logged into my email while I was sedated. That's when we realized this wasn't just David. Someone inside the hospital had been paid to authorize the sale digitally. That's when the judge reopened the case. Her words still echo in my memory. Mr. Miller, you may have just exposed a fraud ring bigger than your own family. The courtroom fell silent. I sat there, weak, trembling, but alive, and finally ready to fight for everything I'd almost lost. The moment Judge Halverson reopened the case, the air in that courtroom changed. You could feel it. The quiet hum of people realizing this wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was criminal. And I wasn't just a wronged brother. I was the only living witness to a paper trail that someone desperately wanted erased. After the hearing, my lawyer, Kate, placed a folder in front of me. Mark, this is the hospital's internal device access log. You see these numbers? She pointed to a string of digits that looked meaningless. Each one is a workstation ID. This one, 4N ICU 213. It's the same device that pinged your email at the exact minute your digital signature was submitted. So it was the hospital's computer. Exactly. Which means someone on the inside helped your brother authorize the transfer. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I trusted every nurse who'd stood at my bedside, every hand that had adjusted my oxygen tube. And now, I had to accept that one of them had used that same hand to help steal my life. Kate continued, her voice calm but tight. We'll subpoena the hospital's shift logs, then match them against the access time. Can we find out who it was? She looked up. We can, and we will. That night, sleep refused to come. My chest still burned from weeks of pneumonia, and the oxygen hissed like an accusation. I kept picturing the ward, the nurses walking in, checking vitals, pressing buttons. Which one of them had looked at me lying there and thought, he won't notice if I sell his home? 2 days later, Kate called. We've got the logs. Only 3 people were signed into 4N ICU 213 between 4 and 4:20 p.m. on October 11th. 2 nurses and 1 attending tech. Names? Nurse Jenna Moore, nurse supervisor Christine Hill, and an IT tech named Paul Anders. I recognized one instantly. Jenna. The soft-spoken woman who'd sat beside me every evening, telling me about her college classes and how she volunteered with veterans. The one I'd trusted most. Are you sure? I asked quietly. The log doesn't lie, Kate said. But let's be certain before we accuse anyone. I'm scheduling an interview. Unofficially. My investigator will pose as a hospital compliance officer. When the day came, I insisted on being there, even if my doctor protested. I sat in the corner of the small hospital office, oxygen tube hidden under my jacket, watching Jenna walk in. Her expression softened when she saw me. "Mr. Miller, you're up and walking." "That's wonderful." Her smile could have fooled anyone, but I was done being fooled. Kate's investigator, a man named Troy, nodded politely. "Ms. Moore, we're doing a brief device access review for the ICU systems. Could you confirm whether you used workstation 4N ICU 213 on October 11th? She frowned, thinking, "Probably. That's my usual station for vitals input." Troy tapped his pen. "Do you recall logging into any external accounts that day? Email, EHR export, property documents?" Her eyes flickered, and barely, but I saw it. "No, just patient files." "Not even to help with a digital authorization requested by a family member?" He pressed. Now her voice thinned. "I don't think so." Troy slid a paper across the table. "This is a system capture from that day. Your user ID is here, timestamped at 4:09 p.m. Accessing an external PDF titled Power of Attorney. Transfer, PDF. Under the email m.miller@daytonmail.com, the color drained from her face. She didn't deny it. Instead, she whispered, "Oh God." He said it was an insurance update. "Who said?" I asked quietly. She looked at me, tears filling her eyes. "Your brother." The room went silent. Jenna broke down, shaking. "He came to the nurse's desk earlier that day, said he was handling your medical bills and needed to finalize insurance coverage before surgery. He looked so desperate, I thought I was helping." "You logged into my email," I said flatly. "He said you'd given him permission. He had the code, the verification text, everything." "That code came to my phone," I snapped. Her sob turned into a gasp. "He told me you couldn't read text because of sedation, that he'd asked the doctor to forward it to me so I could complete it on your behalf." "And you believed him?" She wiped her face. "We see families do paperwork all the time. I didn't think that's the problem," Kate cut in. "No one thought. You executed a legal transfer worth $500,000. Jenna's hands trembled as she whispered, "He paid me $500. I thought it was just a fee reimbursement." Kate's eyes hardened. "That's not reimbursement. That's a bribe." The meeting ended in silence. Jenna left pale and broken, escorted by security. As the door shut, I turned to Kate. "So now what?" "Now," she said, "we bring the judge what she asked for. Proof." Over the next week, Kate compiled everything. Hospital logs, ACH timestamps, and Jenna's written statement. The reversal code became our weapon. The Federal Reserve's ACH division confirmed that a secondary reversal was triggered 6 hours after the sale, an automated process usually reserved for fraud flagging. The system had caught it, but the request was buried by a bank employee's override. Someone else had been paid to keep it quiet. At the next hearing, the courtroom felt smaller. My brother sat 3 rows ahead, calm as if nothing had happened. When Jenna entered under subpoena, he didn't look at her. "Not once," Kate stood. "Your Honor, Exhibit C, internal access logs confirming unauthorized use of the victim's medical terminal to execute a financial transaction under forged authority. The nurse, Jenna Moore, has confessed to the act under misrepresentation by the defendant, David Miller." The judge raised her eyebrows. "And the reversal?" Kate handed her another file, triggered by the Federal Reserve's fraud detection algorithm, blocked manually from within Dayton Trust Bank. The judge glanced at the defense. "Mr. Faulkner, your client has anything to say?" David's lawyer stood, shifting uncomfortably. "Your Honor, we maintain this was a misunderstanding. My client acted to preserve his brother's estate while under medical uncertainty." "Stop," the judge said sharply. "Estate preservation does not involve falsifying medical logins or bribing staff." Her gavel tapped once, the sound crisp as thunder. "Case reopened under criminal fraud jurisdiction. For the first time in months, I exhaled without pain. Justice wasn't done yet, but it had begun." That night, I drove home, or what used to be home. The house was locked under court injunction now, half empty from the buyer's halted move-in. I walked through the foyer, touching the walls, remembering every nail I'd hammered, every bill I'd paid late just to keep the roof above me. The air smelled of dust and dried paint, but to me it was memory. On the counter sat a single envelope addressed to me. Inside was a handwritten note. "Mark, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I thought it was temporary, just until you got better. But things got out of control. Please don't hate me. David." No return address, no phone number. just guilt scribbled in ink. I folded the note carefully and put it back. Not forgiveness. Not yet. The following week, news broke that Dayton Trust's compliance officer had resigned. Anonymous tipsters, likely Kate's doing, exposed multiple fraudulent transfers authorized during medical emergencies. My case was the first that survived reversal. One of those reversals, the judge later told me privately, had triggered the flag that saved everything. That ACH reversal, she said, wasn't luck. It was the system's way of waking up. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It pings quietly on a server log. As I left the courthouse that day, Jenna approached me, eyes red but steady. "Mr. Miller, I wanted you to know I'm cooperating fully. The police said my statement will help convict him. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to hear that." I nodded slowly. "You made a mistake. Now you're fixing it. That counts for something." She smiled weakly. "You're kinder than I deserve." "Maybe," I said, "but kindness is how I remind myself I'm still human." That night I stood outside the house again, looking at the dark windows. Once it was home, now it was evidence. But somewhere deep inside, I knew. The real house I needed to rebuild wasn't made of wood or nails. It was made of trust, and that construction had only just begun. By the time the subpoenas reached Dayton Trust Bank, the story had already leaked to the local press. Brother sells siblings home while he's in ICU. Reporters called it a tragedy. I called it Tuesday, because by now, betrayal had become part of my weekly routine. The courthouse smell of coffee and copier toner followed me into Kate's office that morning. She was pacing, sleeves rolled up, phone wedged between shoulder and ear. "Yes, I want the full audit trail, not the sanitized PDF. No, we're not waiting for corporate counsel. Get me the ACH layer logs." She hung up, then looked at me. "They're stonewalling. Dayton Trust says their records are proprietary. Translation, someone inside has a reason to keep them buried." "Can the judge force them?" I asked. "She can, but banks move slower than conscience. We'll need leverage." "What kind of leverage?" "The public kind." By noon, an online piece titled "ACH Reversal Ignored in Local Bank Fraud" went viral. Kate never admitted she'd leaked it, but the timing was too perfect. Within 24 hours, Dayton Trust's compliance department suddenly discovered time to talk. Their representative, a man named Harold Benson, arrived for deposition looking like he'd ironed his soul along with his suit. He smiled the way people do when they've already rehearsed their lies. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Morales," he began smoothly. "Our institution values transparency. Any irregularities were purely system side." Kate slid a folder across the table. "System side doesn't bribe nurses or override reversals, Mr. Benson. Someone inside your bank manually suppressed an automated fraud flag." He glanced at the papers, eyes narrowing. "Where did you obtain these?" "Federal Reserve subpoena." That wiped the smile clean off his face. The document was devastating. It showed a single override authorization at 02:37 a.m., entered by user ID DT5891, Benson H. He swallowed hard. "I review transactions nightly. It must have been routine." Kate leaned forward. "Routine? A $500,000 transfer flagged as high risk, reversed by the clearinghouse, then reinstated by you. That's not routine. That's criminal." I sat silently, watching sweat collect at his temples. For weeks I'd been a patient, a victim, a name on a docket. At that table, I became something else, a witness to rot disguised as policy. Benson shifted tactics. Look, there was pressure from above. The client had history with our executive division. "Which client?" Kate asked. He exhaled. "David Miller. He'd been working with our preferred assets team. He told us you were terminal and wanted the funds fast-tracked into trust." I felt the room tilt. "He said I was terminal?" Benson nodded. "He brought a doctor's note, looked legitimate." "From which hospital?" Kate asked. He hesitated. "Dayton General." "The same hospital that logged the fake authorization," she murmured. "Perfect symmetry." For a moment no one spoke. Then Benson whispered, almost pleading, "I didn't know he forged it. I just processed the request. If I'd reversed it, my supervisor would have noticed." Kate's tone was icy. "Name the supervisor." He closed his eyes. "Marjorie Lane, VP of Compliance." The next subpoena hit her desk before lunch. Marjorie Lane entered the courtroom 3 days later, heels sharp enough to draw blood. She was everything the banking world admires, precise, confident, untouchable, until Kate handed her Exhibit F, Ms. Lane. Can you explain why your initials appear on a memo authorizing suppression of ACH reversal Narafin 4472? Her expression barely flickered. That notation simply confirms receipt of an internal report. And the notation, client priority, execute quietly. She straightened. An internal phrase, not criminal. Then why did you email Mr. Benson at 2:41 a.m. saying, handled, keep Miller quiet until Monday? The gallery gasped. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Marjorie inhaled slowly, choosing silence over perjury. Kate pressed on. You understood the reversal was valid. Fraud flagged by the Federal Reserve itself. Yet you buried it. Why? Finally, Marjorie spoke, voice brittle. Because the order didn't come from me. It came from corporate counsel in Columbus. They said it involved a high-value client under a state transition. They said the hospital verified terminal status. The judge leaned forward. Who in Columbus? She hesitated, then said softly, Robert Kane. Kate whispered to me, Senior VP. If he's involved, this goes federal. Over the next week, everything accelerated. The U.S. Attorney's Office opened a financial crimes investigation. Reporters swarmed the courthouse. My brother's face was plastered beside mine on every evening broadcast. Family betrayal exposes banking fraud. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. Justice, it turns out, doesn't heal. It excavates. Every victory unearthed another betrayal. When the FBI finally summoned me for testimony, Agent Dorsey asked the question I'd been dreading. Mr. Miller, do you believe your brother acted alone? No, I said quietly. He acted with a system that rewards shortcuts. Dorsey nodded. That's what we needed to hear. They showed me internal emails recovered from Dayton Trust servers. Subject line, reversal delay, client critical. Attached, a chain authorizing temporary suppression of automated fraud alerts for estate accounts with imminent mortality confirmation. Translation, the bank profited from dying clients. The algorithm wasn't broken. It was trained to look away. That night I couldn't eat. I sat in my rented apartment staring at my old house across the street. Police seals still on the door. I remembered my brother's words. You were dying, man. Maybe he believed that. Maybe the bank convinced him it was mercy, not theft. But mercy never needed a notary. The federal hearing began on a grey Monday. Judge Halverson presided again, sterner now. Marjorie Lane and Harold Benson both turned state's evidence, their testimonies woven like confession tapes. Kate's opening statement cut through the courtroom hum. This case is not about a glitch. It's about greed wearing a business suit. When machines tried to correct injustice, humans turned them off. She presented the ACH log, where my reversal code blinked pending for 12 hours before being buried. The timestamp 002:37 a.m., the same minute Benson admitted entering the override. Then she displayed a second record, newly obtained from the Federal Reserve audit, a follow-up reversal labeled woke process, slang among programmers for an automatic alert reinstated after human suppression. That was the signal Judge Halverson had mentioned, the ACH reversal that woke the system. Kate concluded softly, even code can tell right from wrong. Your Honor, it's time the humans caught up. The gallery applauded until the gavel brought silence. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters asked if I'd forgive my brother. I said, forgiveness and justice aren't opposites, but you have to finish one before you start the other. That evening, the judge called an emergency session. She announced temporary asset freezes on all Dayton Trust executives under investigation. When she spoke the words, full restitution to Mark Miller pending verdict, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Balance. Not peace yet, but balance. Still, the victory carried weight. Kate warned me, they'll appeal. Banks always do. But you've changed precedent, Mark. From now on, digital authorization during medical incapacity counts as conditional consent. That's new law, new law. 2 words that made every sleepless night worth it. Weeks later, as spring warmed the city, I visited the construction site behind the courthouse, a new community center funded by restitution fines from financial crime cases. The sign read, Justice Hall, for those who fought back. Kate had named it after my testimony. Inside, volunteers were wiring computers for senior digital safety classes. I ran my hand along the new outlets, the smell of fresh drywall filling the air. For the first time since ICU, I wasn't remembering. I was rebuilding. Justice doesn't always knock with a gavel. Sometimes it arrives through an ACH ping at 2:37 a.m., refusing to stay buried. When I left that day, I passed a bench engraved with the judge's favorite quote, "The law sleeps, but it never dies." And I smiled because I finally understood it. The bank thought they could bury a reversal, but they woke something else instead. A man who'd decided he wouldn't die quietly again. When this all began, I thought lawyers were mercenaries, paid mouths who knew how to weaponize paperwork. But Kate Morales wasn't like that. She fought like someone with a personal stake in truth, as if each motion filed was a prayer disguised as legal code. 3 weeks after the federal hearing, the investigation split into two paths: the financial crimes case against Dayton Trust and the criminal conspiracy against my brother David. Kate was working both. She barely slept, surviving on black coffee and adrenaline. One night, I found her alone in her office, lights dimmed, scrolling through scanned depositions. "You should be home," I said. She didn't look up. "You should have been in your house. We both got robbed." Her words hung heavy in the quiet. On her desk lay stacks of discovery files, emails, transaction printouts, internal memos marked confidential. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "The missing piece," she murmured. "Something to tie David's motives to the bank's internal fraud pattern. If we prove coordination, the case escalates from personal theft to racketeering. That changes everything." I sank into the chair opposite her. He wasn't smart enough to engineer all this. "Exactly," she said, eyes sharpening. "Someone guided him. The question is, who benefited most when your house sold?" She flipped to a page showing the cash distribution breakdown. "See this? $500,000 wired to a holding company, then split. $470,000 went to a trust under your brother's name. But $30,000 routed to Harrison Legal Consulting, a firm tied to Dayton Trust's outside counsel, the same firm handling estate liquidations for terminal clients. So, they used my case as a test run." Her jaw tightened. "Or as cleanup. When you lived, you ruined their schedule." That sentence sent a chill through me. Somewhere my survival had inconvenienced powerful people. Kate closed the folder. "We'll prove it. But I need one thing from you. Faith." "Faith?" I asked tiredly. "Yes," she said. "Faith that the system we're about to confront will break before we do." Court resumed on a bright Monday. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, law students, retirees following every twist. The judge looked solemn, her voice steady. "We proceed with witness testimony from the victim, Mark Miller." I took the stand again. The oath sounded different this time. Less like ritual, more like resurrection. Kate started gently. "Mr. Miller, can you describe your first awareness of the property transfer?" I recited the sequence, the alert in the ICU, the missing signature, the phone calls that went unanswered. "And when you realized the sale had been processed?" "I felt like I'd been erased," I said quietly, "like the world kept moving but forgot to carry my name with it." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Then she guided me to the evidence. "Now, you testified earlier that an ACH reversal was suppressed by Dayton Trust Bank. Who discovered that suppression?" "You did," I said. Kate smiled faintly. "Objection, self-praise," she muttered under her breath, earning light laughter from the room. Even the judge smiled, but the levity faded fast as she placed the new exhibit on the projector. An internal memo titled Client Expirations, Priority Settlements. Kate's voice cut through the silence. "Your Honor, this document shows deliberate categorization of terminal patients as expedited estate accounts. They use death as a scheduling metric." The judge leaned forward, frowning. "And this was produced by Harrison Legal Consulting?" "Yes," Kate said. "The same firm that received payment from my client's stolen property sale. Signed by senior partner Robert Kane." The defense lawyer objected immediately. "Irrelevant to this proceeding." "Overruled," the judge said. "This goes directly to motive and pattern." Kate turned back to me. "Mr. Miller, what did your brother tell you about the sale?" "He said he thought I was dying." "Who told him that?" "He said the bank showed him a document from a hospital, Dayton General." Kate nodded. "And we've now established that document was generated by Harrison Legal Consulting using internal hospital data provided illegally by a nurse administrator. A complete loop of fraud, bank, lawyer, and medical staff." The courtroom buzzed. Cameras clicked. Kate paused, then faced the judge. "Your Honor, I submit that this is not merely financial fraud. It's spiritual decay under corporate letterhead. We are asking the law to remember what it's supposed to protect: the living. The judge's gavel rapped once. Proceed. After the session, reporters swarmed us outside the courthouse steps. Mr. Miller, do you think faith belongs in a courtroom? One asked. I thought for a moment. If justice is blind, faith is the hand that leads her to the truth. That quote made headlines the next day. Kate called that night. You sounded like a preacher. Maybe pain teaches theology, I said. She laughed softly. If so, you're practically a prophet by now. But beneath her humor, I could hear exhaustion. Kate, why are you doing this? I asked. You could have walked away after the first hearing. She hesitated, then said, My father lost everything in a foreclosure scam. Different decade, same tricks. I promised I'd never let another man lose his home to paperwork. That confession shifted something in me. Suddenly, this wasn't just my fight. It was ours. The following week, we faced the defense's final card. Their lead counsel, Robert Kane himself, appeared in person. Impeccable suit, rehearsed humility. He approached the bench like a man auditioning for sainthood. Your Honor, he began, my firm acted only under the assumption of lawful instruction from our banking client. We regret any misunderstanding. Kate rose slowly. Mr. Kane, you wrote this memo. She held up the damning document. You instructed your team to process expedited settlements for clients under verified terminal care. How do you define terminal? He smiled faintly. Medically irreversible conditions. And what qualifies as verification? Hospital documentation, which your firm obtained how? He hesitated. Through client channels. You mean bribes, she said flatly. Bribes to hospital employees. Objection. Withdrawn, she said, then leaned closer. Tell me, Mr. Kane, did you ever meet Mark Miller? No. Then how did you decide he was dying? The courtroom fell silent. Kane adjusted his tie. We relied on information provided by his brother, an attending physician. Kate's tone hardened. That physician, Dr. Marcus Ellery, has already confessed to falsifying 3 medical summaries for estate clients. Under your retainer. Kane froze. Kate turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit L. Wire transfers from Harrison Legal to Dr. Ellery, matching the dates of 3 fraudulent terminal certifications. One of those certifications belongs to my client. Judge Halverson scanned the papers. Admitted. Proceed. Kate's voice softened. No further questions. The evidence speaks for itself. By the time we stepped outside, evening light bled gold over the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted questions we didn't answer. Kate just looked up at the flag above the building, fluttering against a grey sky. Do you think they'll convict him? I asked. She nodded slowly. They'll convict someone, but true justice? That's slower. It needs faith to stay standing while the world recalculates its profit margins. She smiled faintly, then added, That's why I keep betting on it. 2 days later, the judge issued her interim ruling. Probable cause found for coordinated fraud between financial and legal entities. Immediate injunction against Harrison Legal Consulting. All client settlements frozen pending criminal indictment. Kate read it aloud in her office, tears welling quietly. We did it, Mark. We actually did it. I looked at her and realized she wasn't just a lawyer anymore. She'd become something else. A believer in justice that works like faith, invisible until it moves mountains. She poured 2 cups of coffee, handed me one, and raised it like a toast. To the law that remembers the living, she said. And to the lawyer who bet on faith, I replied. Outside, church bells echoed faintly across downtown. It wasn't Sunday, but for us it felt like salvation. When the bank's lawyers fell, the city moved on, but I couldn't. Because for me, justice still had my brother's face. David's trial wasn't about corporate greed anymore. It was about blood, the kind that doesn't wash off, even when the law says it's clean. The first morning of the hearing, I sat in the same courtroom where it all began. Same oak benches, same smell of polished wood and coffee, same judge presiding. Only difference, this time, my brother was the one in the defendant's chair. He didn't look like the man who once sold my house. He looked smaller. His suit was wrinkled, his hands restless. When he caught my eye, he tried to smile, but it flickered out before it reached me. The bailiff called the room to order. State of Ohio versus David Miller. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Nora Haynes, began the opening. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she said, this case is about betrayal wrapped in legal paperwork. The defendant sold his unconscious brother's home, profited from it, and cooperated with organized fraudsters. You'll see his fingerprints on every transaction. The defense tried painting him as a desperate man pushed by circumstance. My client, his lawyer said, was overwhelmed, misled by professionals. He believed he was preserving his brother's assets, not stealing them. The jury's faces were still, unreadable. I was the first witness called. The same oath, same chair, but this time my voice didn't tremble. Nora walked me through every detail. The ICU alert, the call that never came, the hospital's betrayal, the bank override. When she asked, "Mr. Miller, what did this do to you emotionally?" I paused. How do you measure something like that? It made me doubt every memory I had with him, I said finally. When someone betrays you, it's not the act. It's the rewrite of your entire past. You start wondering if any of it was real. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. The jury looked at David. He looked down. Next came the digital forensic testimony. Screenshots, ACH logs, timestamps. Then Jenna, the nurse, took the stand. She cried as she described how he manipulated her compassion, convincing her the transfer was insurance paperwork. He said his brother was dying. She whispered. He said it would save time. Then came Kate, calm, focused, steady as a metronome. She presented the chain of transactions, ending with the $500 transfer to Jenna's account and the wire trail to David's. Each exhibit landed like a nail in a coffin. The defense tried to pivot. They called David to testify. He walked to the stand, shoulders heavy, eyes hollow. When he raised his right hand, I noticed the tremor. Small but constant. His lawyer started softly. "David, did you love your brother?" "Yes." "Did you intend to harm him?" "No." "Then why did you proceed with the sale?" He hesitated. "Because I thought he was gone," the doctors said. "They said he might not make it. The bills were stacking up. I thought I was saving what he built. And the money." His voice cracked. "I was going to return it. I just needed to pay off the debts first. The people I owed weren't patient." The prosecutor rose. "Mr. Miller, did your brother ever authorize you to sell his home?" "No." "Did he sign anything?" "No." "So you forged it?" His throat worked. "I didn't do it myself." "Who did?" "Jenna." "Helped." "Who paid her?" Silence. She held up the bank transfer slip. "You did. $500. Your account." Same day, David's shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." The prosecutor's tone softened, but only slightly. "Mr. Miller, your brother trusted you with his life. What went through your mind when you saw that alert clear? Knowing you'd sold his house?" He whispered. "I told myself it was mercy." The courtroom went silent. The judge wrote something on her notepad. After testimony, recess was called. I stepped outside into the hallway. The air was heavy with whispers. Reporters lined the marble corridor, their cameras mercifully off. Kate joined me, handing over a coffee. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I thought I'd feel angry, but it's just sad." "Sadness," she said, "is what's left when justice starts working. It's the cleanup crew of conscience." We went back inside for closing arguments. Nora began slow, deliberate. "David Miller isn't a monster," she said. "He's something sadder, a man who traded morality for convenience. He believed death was paperwork and love was collateral. But the law doesn't measure grief in dollars. It measures actions, then the defense. He made a mistake," the lawyer said. "A terrible human mistake. Not every crime deserves a cage." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I didn't move the entire time. I watched shadows crawl across the courtroom floor, each inch feeling like a year of my life. When they finally returned, no one breathed. The foreman stood holding a folded paper. "We, the jury, find the defendant, David Miller, guilty on all counts." The words hit like quiet thunder. My breath caught. David's eyes closed, tears streaking down his face. The judge's gavel came down once. Sentencing to follow in 2 weeks. The bailiff moved forward, but David turned to me before they led him away. "I'm sorry, Mark," he whispered. I nodded once. "I know." Outside, the city looked different. Quieter. Even the air felt like it had exhaled. Kate walked beside me in silence until we reached the courthouse steps. She said softly, "You don't have to forgive him." "I already did," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean release. It means I stop bleeding," she smiled faintly. "Then you're stronger than most." I looked back at the building, the stone pillars catching the last light of evening. For months, that place had been a battlefield. Now it felt like a graveyard, not for people, but for lies. When sentencing day came, I sat behind the prosecutor's table again. David's lawyer argued for leniency, citing emotional distress and debt coercion. But Judge Halverson didn't bend. "Mr. Miller," she said, "you exploited trust at its purest form. Family. This court recognizes your remorse, but remorse after profit isn't redemption. The sentence is 8 years in federal custody, with eligibility for rehabilitation programs after 3. Her gavel fell, sealing the last chapter of betrayal. David turned one last time as they led him away. Our eyes met, and for a brief second, he was my brother again. The one who fixed cars in the driveway, who called me when our father died, who used to believe in decency. Then the doors closed, and he was gone. Kate placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's over." "Not yet," I said quietly. "Justice ends in court. Healing starts after." That night, I drove past the old house, now fully restored, the injunction lifted. Its windows glowed again. The new owners waved when they saw me parked outside. They didn't know who I was. Maybe that was better. I rolled down the window, breathed the cool evening air and whispered, "Goodbye." For the first time, it didn't hurt. Back home, I opened my father's old Bible, the one that survived every move, every storm. On the inside cover, he'd written something I'd forgotten until that moment. Justice is not revenge. It's the world remembering the truth. I closed the book and smiled. The world had remembered. 3 months after David's sentencing, the courthouse steps no longer felt like battlefields, but the echoes of my case still moved through them like aftershocks. Reporters had stopped calling it the Miller case. They had a new name for it now, the ACH trial. It started as a local fraud hearing. It ended by rewriting federal policy. I didn't plan to make history. I just wanted my home back. But somewhere between the ICU and the courtroom, a simple case of theft had evolved into something bigger, a national question. Who speaks for the unconscious? The morning of the congressional hearing, Kate met me outside the federal building in Washington, D.C. She looked more composed than I'd ever seen her. Grey suit, hair pinned, a small silver cross at her collarbone. "You ready to testify?" she asked. I adjusted my tie, nervous. "Ready? No? Honest?" "Yes. That's all they need," she said. Inside, the committee room was crowded with press, senators, and legal scholars. A banner overhead read, "Hearing on the Electronic Consent Protection Act, ECPA." My story had become the backbone of the proposed bill. When the clerk swore me in, the flashbulbs started. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, from memory. Senator Garrison, the committee chair, leaned forward. "Mr. Miller, thank you for being here. Could you explain, in your own words, what you learned from this ordeal?" I took a breath. "That consent is fragile, sir. We build our lives on signatures and trust. But when machines start speaking for the unconscious and banks hide behind automation, consent stops being real. It becomes code." A murmur rippled across the room. The senator nodded. "You believe this was more than personal fraud?" "Yes," I said. "It was systemic convenience. The idea that paperwork matters more than people." Then came the turning point. Kate took the stand next. She spoke like a surgeon, precise, controlled, lethal in truth. "Digital authorization laws," she said, "were written before hospitals carried tablets and before ACH systems could approve $500,000 in 4 clicks. The law assumed presence. It never imagined absence. Mr. Miller's case proves that electronic consent during medical incapacity must be reversible by law, not negotiable by banks." She placed Exhibit 22 on the table, the same reversal log that had saved me. "This single entry," she continued, "represents the new frontier of justice. It's time we legislate it." Applause broke the usual decorum. Even some senators joined in. After her testimony, Senator Torres, an ex-prosecutor, turned to me. "Mr. Miller, if this law passes, your case will be cited nationwide." "How does that feel?" I smiled faintly. "Like getting my house back one courtroom at a time." Laughter rippled gently through the chamber, but behind it was truth and hope. The next month, the Electronic Consent Protection Act passed committee review unanimously. It mandated hospitals and banks to cross-verify digital authorizations with medical status checks. For the first time, unconscious patients couldn't unknowingly consent to anything. The law informally became known as Miller's Rule. Kate called the day the president signed it into law. "You did it," she said, voice trembling. "We did it," I replied. "No," she said softly. "You lived it." That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea, and watched the neighborhood lights blink one by one. I thought about every person who'd ever signed something without reading the fine print, every patient who trusted the system to protect them. Maybe finally it would. 2 months later, I was invited to lecture at the Ohio State Bar Association. They called it the ethics of electronic consent. I stood at the podium, the same shy electrician who once spent his nights fixing outlets. Now lawyers and judges listened like I'd discovered fire. I began simply, technology didn't betray me. People using it without conscience did. The answer isn't fear of machines. It's responsibility with power. The audience was silent, pens hovering. I continued. When you automate empathy out of the system, you end up with convenience crimes. Fraud becomes invisible because it hides behind efficiency. Afterward, a young law student approached me. "Sir," she said, "you made me want to practice ethics law." Then maybe all this was worth it, I told her. In the following months, I worked with Kate on a pro bono foundation, the Sullivan Miller Project, named after her mentor and my late wife's maiden name. We offered free digital audit services for seniors, reviewing their authorizations, cross-checking power of attorney forms, teaching them how to lock financial access when hospitalized. Our slogan was simple. You can trust people, but verify the system. We traveled across Ohio, speaking at community centers, churches, and nursing homes. Everywhere we went, people came forward with stories. Children tricking parents into signing property transfers. Hospitals charging ghost procedures. Banks auto-renewing estate drafts. Each story was another scar on the same body of injustice. Kate's words echoed in my mind every time. Faith isn't passive, Mark. It's proof you believe good people can still fix broken systems. One afternoon, we were invited to speak at the Cleveland courthouse, the same one where it all began. The benches had been refinished, the walls repainted, but the air still smelled like memory. As I took the podium, I saw Judge Halverson sitting in the front row. She gave me a small nod. I said, "When I stood here last, I was a man who lost everything. My health, my home, my brother. But justice isn't about getting things back. It's about making sure no one else loses them the same way." I paused. The ACH reversal woke the judge, but it also woke something in me. A belief that the law, when guided by conscience, is still capable of mercy. When the applause ended, the judge approached me quietly. "Mr. Miller," she said, "you've done more for this court than most lawyers ever will." I smiled. "All I did was survive." She shook her head. "You testified with truth. That's rarer than survival." That evening, Kate and I walked out into the spring air. The courthouse steps were empty, washed in gold from the sunset. She looked tired but content. "So what now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "we build what comes next." We sat for a long time in silence, watching people pass. Young lawyers, courthouse clerks, janitors sweeping the marble floor. I realized then, justice doesn't live in verdicts or headlines. It lives quietly in people who decide the truth still matters. Months later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a handwritten note from Senator Garrison. "Your case taught us that justice isn't about speed. It's about staying awake. Thank you for waking the system." Folded inside was a plaque. It read, "Mark Miller, citizen advocate, the man who made the law remember the living." I laughed softly, setting it on my desk beside a faded photograph. Me and David. Age 10, holding our father's toolbox, I whispered, "We fix things, Dad, just not the way we planned." Outside, thunder rolled gently across the sky. For once, it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like applause from somewhere higher. Because sometimes, justice doesn't shout. It just wakes up and stays awake. The envelope came on a rain-grey Tuesday, addressed in the block letters I'd known since childhood. David Miller, March 74163. I stood at the counter beside Neat, stacks of Sullivan Miller brochures and a humming. Backup server, the safe life I'd built brushing against. A ghost from the one I'd barely survived. "Open it," Kate said from the doorway. We'd agreed months ago that if David ever wrote, I wouldn't read it alone. The paper smelled of starch and floor wax. "Mark, if this reaches you, it means the anger in my hands cooled long enough to be honest." He wrote about prison routine and a cellmate who snores like an idling truck. Then the tone shifted. "I wanted the house because I thought losing it would kill you slower than poison, but faster than forgiveness." I lied in plural. Kate's hand rested on my back. Breathe. He described watching our case on the prison TV, the clerk reading the ACH reversal log, the judge straightening like a wire pulled tight. When the clerk said reversal, I realized mercy is just a transfer stopped mid-flight. Somebody hits a switch. I never learned that muscle. Anger and warmth fought in my chest. Grief is a revolving door. You step out and find yourself inside again. He confessed what I already knew. Forged papers, bribes, cashier's checks, then offered names. A title runner in Parma, a banker who ignored delay holds, a hospital contractor selling patient data, a small criminal map. Kate photographed each page. Morrison will love this, she said, and the grand jury will love it more. There was a paragraph for Dad. He'd have boxed my ears, then driven me to court himself. He believed in wrenches and consequences. I wanted the wrench without the lesson. Then one for me. I chose the hour your body couldn't answer back. I weaponized your silence and called it paperwork. Fraud is murder with good diction, my throat closed. He always lands a perfect line before he detonates something, I muttered. Maybe he's learning to use the line without the explosion, Kate said. The last page. Don't visit unless you want to. Use the names. If a family like ours asks whether monsters are born or made, tell them I'm proof habits set harder than blood. If you ever forgive me, do it on a day you feel strong, not lonely. He signed David Miller. Formal, distant, final. What do you want to do? Kate asked. Call Morrison, I said, and write him back. Detective Morrison met us in a beige conference room. He read silently, tapping each name. This lines up, he said. Your brother just mapped the network. Warrants by morning. He'll get credit for cooperation, not poetry. Kate smiled. Maybe life grades poetry. We left into rinsed air. I told her I needed an hour alone. She nodded. Don't confuse relief with reconciliation. At home, I pulled a yellow pad. David, I read your letter with both hands because it weighed more than paper. You weren't the villain. You were the vector. The sickness was cowardice mixed with entitlement. You trained for it on me. I forgive you like a building code. Forward-looking, strict. I'll use your map to shield other families with the insulation you stripped from us. That's my mercy. Reversal in motion. Dad taught us breakers exist to protect life. You tripped mine. The court reset it. I'm leaving it on. Write again if writing builds someone else. Tutor a kid who thinks speed is courage. Hand him your sentence about mercy and switches.ps. I'll visit the day you can name one. Thing you built for someone who can't pay you. Back, I mailed it and felt steadier than I had since the ICU. That evening at St. Gabriel's, seniors filled the parish hall. We taught them how to freeze credit, appoint safe proxies, and print wallet cards that read, "Forgiveness can be strict." After the session, an old man said, "My boys are good, but I'd like a breaker anyway." "We'll install 2, I told him. Driving home, I realized reconciliation and reform are cousins, not twins. One may never arrive, but the other keeps the lights on. At dusk, I circled the house the court returned to me. The porch boards sang their tired hymn. You're still you, I told the wood. So am I, the server closet chimed. Backups complete. Somewhere downtown, lights in the courthouse clicked off floor by floor. Kate poured tea. What do you hope your letter does? A small reversal, I said. One switch in one hand. And if it doesn't, then it reminds me what my hands are for. Morning came with Morrison's call. Warrants signed. We're moving. Your brother's letter is already saving people who'll never know your names. Kate grabbed her bag. Ready? Ready. We stepped into clean air. A blue jay shrieked from the feeder. I locked the door, the house I almost lost, and felt gratitude settle like weight I could carry. On the seat beside me lay a single brochure for our next clinic. Across the top, when you can't speak, your paperwork will. Below, in smaller print, and if someone tries to sell your life while you heal, will be the reversal. At the first red light my phone buzzed, the prison counselor. David's tutoring younger inmates, she said. Asked for more lined paper. Kate squeezed my hand. Not every story needs redemption. Some just need a working switch. The light turned green, and we drove on toward another courthouse. Another morning rinsed clean enough to begin again. A year after the law passed, and David's letter changed the map of our case, I found myself walking through the same courthouse again, only this time not as a plaintiff, not as a witness, not even as an advocate. I was there as a lecturer. The plaque outside read, Annual Justice and Ethics Symposium. Keynote, Mark Miller. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd once stood in this building wearing a hospital wristband, trembling as my home slipped away. Now, my name was printed on lanyards. Inside the courtroom, the crowd hummed like static. Judges, clerks, law students, and even a few survivors of fraud cases we'd helped. Cameras were set up at the back, live streaming to universities nationwide. Kate adjusted my microphone, her hair silvering at the edges. "You ready, counselor?" she teased. "Still just an electrician," I said. "Only now I rewire laws instead of light fixtures." She smiled. "Same work, higher voltage." When I stepped to the podium, silence settled over the room. The lights were warm, the kind that turn nerves into purpose. 2 years ago, I began. I woke up in a hospital thinking life was fragile. I didn't know yet that trust was too. The court didn't just give me my house back, it gave me a second education. I told them everything. The fraudulent sale, the ACH reversal, the courtroom battle, the prison letter, the slow rebuild of purpose. But I spoke less about loss and more about what survived. Technology isn't the villain, I said. It's neutral wire. Whether it carries power or burns a house down depends on the people holding it. The audience listened like they were hearing something sacred. A young law clerk near the front wiped his eyes. "People ask if I forgave my brother," I continued. "The truth is simpler. Forgiveness wasn't a gift to him. It was an eviction notice to the bitterness living inside me." A soft murmur of approval moved through the benches. "Justice," I said, "isn't a gavel. It's a long-term maintenance plan. It checks the wiring of our institutions before the spark becomes fire." Applause rose, not thunderous, but sincere, the kind that means someone heard you deeper than their ears. After the talk, the judge who'd sentenced David approached. Her robe was replaced by a charcoal blazer. "Mr. Miller," she said, "I wanted you to know, your case is now mandatory study in judicial ethics." I blinked. "For what? Electrical safety? For remembering humanity," she said. "You reminded us law without empathy is just math with a hammer." As she left, Kate handed me a folder. Inside was a letterhead from the Department of Justice. Appointment, Senior Civil Consultant, Ethical Automation Division. "They're offering you a federal advisory role," she said. I stared at it. "Me? I don't even like computers that talk back." "Exactly why they need you," she replied. "Because you remember what silence feels like." I accepted. Months turned into another year. The Sullivan Miller Foundation grew from a small Ohio office into a national hotline. Volunteers, former victims, retired lawyers, even nurses, trained to spot fraud flags in hospital billing systems. One evening, while reviewing calls, Kate leaned against my desk. "Do you ever think about visiting him again?" "David?" I asked. She nodded. "He's eligible for parole hearings next spring." "I think about it," I said. "But visiting isn't forgiveness. It's maintenance. I'll go when there's something worth repairing." "You're still brothers," she said. "Yeah," I sighed. "Just running on separate circuits," she smiled. "As long as the breaker's still on." Spring came with thunderstorms. One night I sat on the porch, listening to rain tap against the wooden rails. Lightning flashed in the distance, the same pulse that once powered my nightmares. Now it felt like rhythm. Inside, my computer chimed with a news alert. Federal court cites Miller's rule in landmark patient data theft case. Another family saved. Another system reversed. I closed the laptop, grabbed my jacket, and walked into the night. The street smelled of wet asphalt and magnolia. A neighbor waved. "Evening, Mr. Miller. Did you see? They used your name on the new bill again." I laughed softly. "Yeah, guess it stuck." He grinned. "You made the law human." "Just made it remember its heartbeat," I said. The next morning, a small envelope arrived. Prison stationery again. Same handwriting, but steadier this time. Mark. "They're transferring me to a vocational unit. I'm teaching basic wiring to inmates who failed every test life gave them. I used your phrase, neutral wire. You were right. Current isn't evil, just directionless. Maybe people are the same. Thank you for giving me something to pass forward." David, I read it twice. Then I pinned it on the corkboard above my desk, next to the DOJ letter. Kate saw it later and whispered, "Looks like the reversal completed." Maybe it had. A month later, we hosted our largest seminar yet. Over 600 attendees, from policymakers to medical directors. The event closed with a standing ovation. As lights dimmed, Kate leaned toward me. "You know, if your father could see this," I finished her sentence. "He'd check the wiring first. We both laughed until the hall echoed. That night I returned to my workshop. The same basement once meant to stage my death. Now it was filled with monitors, server racks, and a plaque that read, "The place where justice was rewired." I ran my fingers over the polished wood of the workbench. The scars from old tools were still there, but they no longer looked like damage. They looked like proof. The phone buzzed. Kate again. "They're naming a federal amendment after you. The Miller Integrity Provision. What does it do? It forces digital systems to confirm human consent through voice verification." I smiled. "A law that listens." "Exactly." I hung up, turned off the main light, and left one bulb glowing over the workbench, the same kind I'd fixed the night everything began. Outside, dawn broke across the Cleveland skyline, soft gold bleeding into blue. I thought of Dad, of Margaret, of David behind his classroom door. Life had become a sequence of reversals. Betrayal into reform, silence into advocacy, anger into design. When I first testified, I'd said the world measures justice in paperwork. Now I knew better. It measures it in time, in what you do after the verdict. I whispered to the empty street. Case closed. The wind answered by rattling the chimes on my porch. They didn't sound like ghosts anymore. They sounded like applause. I stepped inside, closed the door, and smiled as the lock clicked home. Secure, deliberate, final.